Hello.
Wait. Live.
Live.
We're live. How we do? We're here. We made it. You made it back, which is good.
I
Almost
did.
didn't, apparently, but
Still a little worn out. The conference is on Tuesday, and it takes me, especially when I'm an idiot about my travel. I was telling you before, but I'll just share with everybody so you know who you're dealing with here. I went to the wrong airport in DC on my return trip. I went to Reagan because that's where I flew in, not really even thinking I was supposed to double check my tickets. But my return flight was out of Dulles, and so I had to rebook a flight for later in the evening. When my plane finally arrived after several weather delays, there was a maintenance issue. They had to swap us into a new plane, and we didn't leave until I think between like 9:30 and 10. So I didn't actually get back to Burlington until like 11 something. I didn't get home until after midnight. I had a really stupid day of travel, and it was all my fault. So I've been recovering since, and still trying to process everything that was presented at E-Cigarette Summit, which is, part of the reason we're doing this.
We're here to do that. And I see some people in the chat already. I see Addie Tooney and Bradley live streams, Adrian Mason, got Steve Tottenham, and I think that's who's in the chat right now over in on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah, welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and that notification bell and give us some likes, please. Give us some likes.
Michelle Elliott chiming in here. Hi, Michelle.
I see Michelle. Hey, Michelle. So, E-Cigarette Summit. How long has that been going on now?
This is the is that showing up? Eighth annual summit. I think that's just for DC. I think it's been going on longer than that in London. So I want to say 10 or 11 years. I think it was like 10 years. I went to, I think, the second or third one in London, and that was 2015, I think. So yeah, and then it took another year. I think the next 2016, would that be right? Yeah, it would be 2016 when it showed up in DC. Okay. And that was I think CASAA went to the first one in DC, and we were trying to kind of do what some of the advocates in Europe had done, was they sort of set up a table in sort of like next to where the registration table was. And so as attendees were coming in, we had set up this display. Julie has an amazing collection of sort of the historical timeline of devices. And so we were, showing people, this is what we used to do before we had, actual manufacturers making things. And people were absolutely shocked.
Just gobsmacked at all like the mod type stuff and the DIY and everything.
Yeah, the atomizers that people had cobbled together with, parts from the hardware store. God only knows what we were exposed to. I wasn't vaping back then. I didn't start until 2013 when there were actual devices on the market. So that was.
I don't know. I can't say that we were really exposed to anything worse. If anything, the ingredients and stuff were a lot more simple. There are a lot more complicated formulas today, and the devices, yeah. I'll give you that, because they were coming before they started. Like, people started wrapping their own coils and things like that. We just got everything straight from China, and but nobody, nothing really bad happened. So I guess,
yeah, I mean, it
was a good thing.
It was short enough, right? That between the time that FDA started seizing products and the lawsuit wrapped up, I think a lot of people sort of panicked and were like, okay, let's see if I can make an atomizer in my basement. I've got some tools, and using different types of metals, and who knows how they were soldering things together. And it was just
fish tank filter.
Right. Yeah, blue foam. Oh my God, if I have to hear about the blue foam one more time, I'm probably going to scream.
The Buff Puff mod.
Yep.
Eddie's asking, he says, not that I don't enjoy seeing your faces, but where's your boy Logan today? Logan got a day off. Logan and I try to alternate, but since Alex wasn't last week, you got Logan and I, and then next week it'll be Alex with Logan. So
But does Logan actually he has a day off from us, but
from us, yeah,
I
yeah.
think he's
He has a
still,
week. This is a week off from us.
yeah,
This is his alternate week.
I think
We'll
he's
say
working.
he's probably is working still,
Yeah, he's
even though it's a
working.
Saturday. Poor boy. But anyhow, so yeah, I'll be gone next week because my son's getting married. So excited about that.
Congrats.
Not next week, but the next show. Sorry. Let's see what else is going on. That's it. So what, it started on Friday? Did the summit start on Friday?
No, the summit was all day on Tuesday. It's a
Oh, just all
one-day
day on Tuesday.
event.
Oh no, I'm totally blanking. I'm thinking about GFN because of that whole thing. That's how it starts. Never mind. I'm getting those two confused. Yeah. So E-cig summit was on Tuesday. And how many people would you say were there?
I think there's usually like a few hundred. I'm not good at estimating crowd sizes, but I think maybe the capacity of the room is like between 200 and 300 people.
Okay.
It's usually, well attended for sure. And all of the, sort of luminaries and people who've been working on this issue for many years are there and they're presenting. So it's it's an in-demand kind of conference.
And who is behind it? I mean, who runs it? Who are the organizers? Do you know?
So some of the old heads in the community may remember Oliver Kershaw. He, I believe, started it with a partner back in 2013 or 2014. And then I think he sold it to Smooth Events, and Smooth Events now manages it. So Amanda Strange is the person who puts it together every year. She's located in in England. And she wasn't able to make it this year, but so she was missed. But the staff who took care of things were competent and friendly and made things go off relatively without a hitch. There were some audio problems throughout the day, but other than that, all the presenters made it up there. All the information was given, and it was a pretty intense day.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to note that this is, this event is funded by people who are buying tickets. It's not something that the industry puts on. It's not something that public health puts on. It's based on, folks buying to come and see the show.
And how many years have you gone to that now? Your second year or your third year?
I feel like I've gone in total probably four.
Oh, more than that. Okay.
5 times. Once in London, and then 2 or 3 times here it would be 3 times in DC. Definitely 3 times. And it's always been at the Georgetown Marriott.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you weren't like a speaker or anything, but you've always been kind of like on a panel or something like that. How many years have you been doing the panels?
Well, I think it was last year. I was again just a responder to the first panel, and I always mention the significance of that over the years in several conferences. I mean, other than GFN, the role of a consumer representative, we're usually put towards the end of the day or the end of the programming. And the unfortunate bit about that is that towards the end of the day, most people, well, not most people, a huge chunk of people are leaving. They've got flights to catch. They've got to get back home and go to work.
Right.
So most people stick around for the morning sessions, and then they start to, there's an attrition after lunch. But E-Cigarette Summit and GTNF have both sort of committed to putting consumer voices a little bit more up front. And so this was the second year that I was asked to be a responder to the first panel. And so, as I noted last year, it sort of gives us the opportunity to kind of set the table or the tone for stuff that discussions, at least, that happen throughout the rest of the day. And so I usually get about 5 minutes. I took 7 to do my response, and I needed some of that to have complete brain lock and figure out what I was going to say.
Now, you said you call yourself a responder. Now, how does that work? There's a panel. You said it was the first panel of the day. So who was on the panel, and was there a moderator asking questions, or how does that work?
So it was actually the first session. So I'm responding to the session, and I'm going to get open the list of speakers here. So The chair was Professor Robin Mermelstein, and she's from University of Illinois at Chicago. Our opening keynote speaker was Dr. Rafael Meza from Integrative Oncology BC Cancer Research Institute. And then we heard from our speakers, Mitch Zeller, former director of Center for Tobacco Products, Deborah Arnott, she's the chief executive for Action on Smoking and Health UK. We heard from Ben Uden from ASH New Zealand, and then Dr. Brian King, the current Center for Tobacco Products director. And a lot of it sort of, I think, established a good flow. We started things off with hearing about patterns in switching, and looking at the different age groups, who is adopting these products more, how are smoking rates changing, stuff like that. And I apologize for being really light on details on all of the presentations. One of the things I noted, talking to people afterwards, is trying to summarize E-Cigarette Summit, which is a very information dense conference, is like trying to stuff a basketball into a shot glass. It is by the end of the day, people are sort of walking around like, oh my God, like what? It's just, you can feel the pressure on the back of your eyes. It's just a lot of information. So
there you are.
There I am. That's an old picture.
But you were on there at first.
I need to update that for Summit.
And yeah, I think when I scrolled down, here's like, what questions will be explored? Is vaping a gateway to cigarette smoking?
Yeah, really. I'll take that right away, because this is something I am writing up a summary of my experience and sort of CASAA's role in all of this. For those who are sort of really tuned into this discussion, you may have noticed, I think, over the past couple of years, we don't really hear gateway that much anymore. The language has changed, and I think they're sort of rebranding it as nicotine primes young brains for future substance use. So it's still gateway. It's just they've added a bunch of words. And I, again, I don't think that nicotine uniquely possesses those magical abilities. It is something, any kind of substance use when we're young, I think, does sort of at least open those doors to further exploration. And it's not a one-way street, for most people. So again, that is something that came out of Dr. Brian King's presentation, and yeah. So
there's the panel you were on.
I'm skipping ahead and bouncing around, but I'll leave you with the questions if you like.
Right. Oh no, I was just going through, because I do recall seeing this. This was the panel that you were on.
Mm-hmm. I didn't actually sit on the panel. I was a responder.
Oh, no.
And I think I was.
So wait. So say that again. I was trying to pull up the thing. So you weren't like up on stage with some other people or anything. No. You were up on stage.
I was behind the podium.
Okay.
Speaking. I of course I took about half the time of a regular presenter. These are folks who are getting up there with data and science and slides, and they are presenting very complex stuff. I am simply sort of, I am not a very good, reaction person to, things that I'm just hearing immediately, especially not, on a stage in front of hundreds of people. So I came with sort of prepared remarks based on sort of the excerpts I had on the agenda, as to what we're talking about, and trying to maybe fill in some gaps, and giving the consumer view of some of the stuff that we were being presented with. For my part, for CASAA's part, really the most significant development in the past week or two has been this announcement, or it was a correspondence authored by Brian King and a couple of other authors, sort of outlining FDA's commitment to educating healthcare providers, doctors. That you guys did a whole thing on this 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so, and if folks haven't watched that, go back and watch that. I have not watched the entire thing, but I know you guys did an excellent job. So thank you. And so this is about educating doctors about the risk continuum and trying to realign their perceptions of risk with reality. The numbers, of course, and it bears it. I think it's important enough to restate that more than 60% of doctors believe that nicotine causes cancer. More than 80% of people believe that e-cigarettes are just as or more harmful than smoking. None of that could be further from the truth. And so we need to realign risk perceptions. And FDA is going about this by providing education to doctors so that they will actually recommend, first of all, nicotine replacement therapy to their patients. But the kind of the sticking point here, and there's a lot of legal reasons and liability issues and professional reasons as to why this is, but doctors are looking at FDA approved therapies as a first line treatment. And then once people fail with those products, then doctors can have a conversation about maybe using e-cigarettes. I don't recall anything about other smoke-free products. I seriously doubt a doctor is ever going to recommend snus
Right.
or tobacco leaf products, but
Unfortunately.
nicotine pouches, as the word of mouth lore goes, pouches were originally, I think, envisioned as being a nicotine replacement product. So that should be included in the other options that doctors talk about with patients. And so this was, I think, part of Brian King's presentation, but it's really weird to sit there and listen to, you know, good words, things that we need to hear coming from FDA, but at the same time, it's sort of like he's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Right.
It seems really hard to get away from those ingrained talking points that nicotine is extremely addictive, and he has said in the past he's sort of just contradicting himself in real time and saying things like he didn't say it this time, but he has in the past, something along the lines of there's no redeeming qualities to nicotine.
Ugh.
That is a position that FDA has expressed at conferences and publicly before, and it seems difficult for them to move away from that narrative. And so, for our part, for my response, I came sort of preloaded with a message of honesty is the starting point. Honesty is the best way forward. Consumers need to hear honest messages from FDA. And if there is anything that, an agency or NGOs, that all the campaigns can do, that we don't have to wait 4 or 5 years for all the science to come back and determine what the best messages are and how they can be targeted at specific groups.
Right.
We can just start by stopping the promotion of misinformation. And to me, there's this disconnect. It's like we're watching FDA produce these materials through Real Cost campaign and other campaigns that are targeted to specific marginalized groups, and they depict vaping in this very scary, and it's meant to scare people away from the products, and so it's depicted in this way. But at the same time, you want doctors to recommend these products as a second line treatment. I it just it, there's so much cognitive dissonance there.
Yep.
It's mind boggling. I'm even having a hard time saying it with my mouth. Um, so um, yeah, that was really, I think, the thrust of my comments, and I think they were relevant to the discussions because we see at the beginning of this session a presentation of the data, who is switching, and smoking prevalence continues to fall. I mean, a theme throughout the conference was not necessarily celebrating the very low smoking prevalence among young people, but acknowledging that we are way ahead of schedule, and we are likely, it is possible, within my lifetime at least, we could see smoking among young people go to zero. It's phenomenal. And I'll add to that, something else I'm including in the write-up. There was, I need to get her, hold on, let me get the session up here. There was, I think her name is,
Yeah, unfortunately, I was hoping to be able to show some clips from this. I'm just telling the audience that I was hoping that during the show we'd be able to show some clips, but they don't make those public until it's what, up to, I'm not sure when. I think it might be 3 months after or
Yeah,
something like that. But it is available to people who are attendees on an app that they have. Unfortunately, that we don't have permission to share those publicly. So,
right.
but
So later in the day, we saw a presentation from Dr. Amanda Graham, and she is the Chief Health Officer with the Truth Initiative. And a lot of us may know that, Truth Initiative developed this app directed at young people to help them quit vaping. And I think some other people have written about this. The results, the outcomes of this app were phenomenal. I think they had said something like 700,000 to 800,000 young people have used this app. I can't remember. I'll have to go back and rewatch her presentation for all the numbers. I don't remember the percentage of those young people who actually quit vaping or nicotine altogether. And I don't know if there was any. I doubt there was movement to cigarettes, but you never know. But the point is that those success rates are virtually unheard of. It was not something that anybody saw. Professors McNeil and Mermelstein noted in their concluding panel that, we never would have seen those. We never saw those numbers for anything trying to get kids to quit smoking. And so there's something to that. And I know Charles Gardner piped up and asked a question at one point, is there anything you can take away from this? And, I think the implication, or he directly said it was, is this an indication that perhaps nicotine from smoke-free products is, less addictive or less dependence forming?
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Yeah. And so it's not clear, and more research needs to be done. And of course, as I think Andrea Valenti and Dr. Graham also noted, when you're dealing with research with adolescents, there are, ethical considerations. You can't just take a group of kids who have never had exposure to nicotine and then start exposing them to even messaging, I think, or, anything that may prompt them to try these products. There's an ethical issue with that. So I think it's difficult. There are, fewer people, in the scheme of who's doing research on what population. I think there's some people who definitely there are people who definitely specialize in this, and you have to be very careful about it. So that's something that, I suspect will be explored. We just don't have a lot of research on it right now. But again, at the end of the day, the success of this app is remarkable, and I think it says something about the products. I'm not totally sure what it says about the app, but for people
just that. So your point is, well, I'm gonna give me a second. I'm just gonna read this, especially for our listeners who are joining us on the podcast. The title of this, what would you call it? Segment, speech,
presentation.
By Dr. Amanda L. Graham, who is the Chief Health Officer at Truth Initiative. It says effectiveness of a vaping cessation text message program among a diverse and high-risk sample of adolescent e-cigarette users. E-cigarettes have been the most commonly used tobacco product among adolescents in the United States for nearly a decade. There is broad consensus that adolescents should not use any form of tobacco product, and yet there are no published studies of vaping cessation interventions for teens. This presentation will describe the results of a randomized controlled clinical trial conducted from October 2021 to October 2023 that compared a text message intervention to an assessment-only control. I'm not sure what that assessment only. They didn't do anything. They just assessed them. Anyhow, among a diverse and high-risk sample of 1,503 U.S. teens ages 13 to 17, results from this trial be placed in the context of ongoing national public efforts to disseminate the intervention, which have yielded uptake among more than 700,000 teens and young adults since the program launched in January 2019. So 700,000 teens have used the app since 2019.
That's what it sounds like.
They use that to quit. Yeah, you have to ask. So your point is, or somebody's point was that they've had apps and stuff like this for getting teens to not smoke or quit smoking, and compared to this, what this study found with helping them quit vaping, the vaping, there were a lot more teens were able to quit using this text message program versus if they had been, versus having been smoking or when they were smoking and trying to use it for that. Or
Yeah, I don't know as far as apps go or what the specific intervention or treatment was. I think, just broadly, Ann McNeil and Robin Mermelstein noted that in the past, any kind of intervention with young people has been, specifically for smoking, did not yield the same
I
results.
gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
so that, of course, begs further investigation. Um, and yeah, I feel like I had something to tack on there, but I lost my thought.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's
Did
okay.
I distract you? Okay, so she was interesting, huh? And did she have anything to say that just kind of made you grind your teeth at all, or
No, no,
bite your
not at
tongue?
all.
Okay.
I think and it spurred, obviously some, very interesting comments and discussion, because this has been something that's been on folks' radar for years. I do know what I was going to say. So
Okay.
the time frame of that research was 2021 to 2023, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, in the wake of the so-called E-valley crisis. And so,
Mm,
I've, without any data or research, my thoughts on that are that whole episode, people getting freaked out about what's in an e-cigarette, folks are getting lung injuries, and of course all of the dishonest communications we saw from CDC and the
right.
media. I think that scared a lot of people. That motivated a lot of young people to stay away from the products or quit. Fortunately, they didn't go to smoking like some people we've heard about.
Yeah.
So, it's, I don't know how much that factors into the success of the app. I think maybe this is something that would need to be, rerun this, uh, again in 2025. Let's see where we're at, and see if the quit rates are the same, see if the motivation to quit is the same. That's so again, it's another one. It's sort of the thing with all science, right? At the end of the day, it's sort of like we do need more information to come to some conclusion about this stuff.
Oh, I have so many questions. I'd have so many. I mean, I would want to know, what kind of follow up. I mean, you have to know how dependent on the vape they were in the first place. If these are all just kids who like vaped a couple times in the last
No,
month,
it's that was presented. I'm sorry, I'm a little light on
that was.
details.
Oh,
This
okay.
is another presentation I need to go back and watch. But with any of these studies, people are given, I think, one or two kind of instruments to gauge what dependency is or what their
Okay.
dependency is. I know there's the Fagerstrom test, and then
Right.
there was something else I think that she mentioned, gauging participants' level of dependency. So they did ask those questions, and this is dealing with young people who are at the very least have a dependency to nicotine.
I've just read so many studies where, oh, sure, look, we gauged how dependent they are on it, but we're going to include everybody still just to keep the numbers up that, was only vaped once, ever vaped or whatever. I've seen
I
that happen
mean,
so many times. That's hard not to be skeptical.
right.
I'm
Well,
not
I
accusing
mean,
this study of doing that because I have not read this study, or
right.
seen this study, but I'm just saying that I'm automatically skeptical after all the things, all the shenanigans I've seen in the
Yeah.
past.
Well, I mean, to your point, I think when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of young people, I think a lot of really low tendencies, uh, specifically, I think they were, making sure that they were dealing with young people who had a high enough level of dependency to really get a good picture. So,
Okay, that makes
and
all
what I
right.
was saying was, I think it bears repeating, which is, there are no real, there are no FDA approved therapies for people under 18. And this has been an issue for many years. FDA had a big listening session about it several years ago, I think pre 2019. And so, this is hopefully another tool in the toolbox. And ultimately, I hope this is something that we can all have a constructive conversation about. And it's not, hopefully this doesn't get twisted into like, oh my God, look at all the work we have to do to get kids away from these products. And, that's not the point. The point is that there are resources available, and we can have, nuanced conversations about how we live with nicotine in society.
And not only that, if they would approve some of the e-liquids that go down to 0 milligram, a lot of adult vapors are able to say, hey, step down until you get to 0, and then you're done. I mean, that's an option that almost never gets talked about. They want them to stop right away, abstinence, all that kind of stuff, I'm sure, but
this was not something that came up in the conference, and I guess if anybody were to bring it up, at least from the consumer perspective, probably I should have. And I did see some conversation on Twitter. I think Lorian Jolly in the UK was recently talking about. I think she switched to products with nicotine salts and didn't really like how they made her feel. I had a very similar experience with Juul in 2015. And my thoughts that I shared on Twitter were, when I suddenly, participating in this conference is getting me back into Twitter.
Welcome to my world, Alex. Welcome to my world.
Welcome back. It's with the nicotine salt products, it seems, even when a lot of independents were getting into this, there was sort of only two strengths to choose from, sort of high and medium. And I understand, and we are supportive of, engaging products that are going to convince people that they can switch away from cigarettes, and a high nicotine strength is very effective at doing that. But people still have that goal of getting away from nicotine entirely. And so and for a lot of us, that sort of self-directed step down process is very helpful. And I think it's been successful for a lot of people. I don't know where, science is with research on that, but at least anecdotally, I mean, it's hard to say anecdotally when we know there are tens of thousands of people out there who went through this. Right. They just aren't being, interviewed or studied, and no data is being gathered as far as I know. That being able to walk yourself down to 0 is very productive, and people need that option. So, again, if there are manufacturers out there listening, and for me, I don't care if you're selling these products legally or not. If you're making them, and I think if anybody were to take an opportunity to speak directly to China, who is flooding the market with disposable high nic products, give us a range. Let us choose to step down. It may not fit your business model, but the people who are really into these products, the people who are really in this industry, are interested in giving people a way to step away from smoking first and nicotine later if they so choose. And that requires a range of nicotine strengths. People often speculate about, and this was something that Mitch Zeller posed to the group, was, what is the end state of nicotine and tobacco? And he kind of gave the audience two choices. You have a world where we get rid of smoking and nicotine use remains, or a world where nicotine use is being discouraged and driven away. And the entire panel, there was consensus that what we really want to see is the end of smoking, and nicotine remaining after that from very low risk sources is fine. I think we can live with that. So if you're in business, I think it's appropriate to plan for a world where, relatively similar rates of nicotine use, just not smoking, and it can be a profitable business without trapping people at a particular nicotine concentration. Right. That's I think how it works, but it's not, this isn't an industry where I think, we need to see a meteoric rise in substance use, basically. There will always be a percentage of people who want to use drugs, and the more responsible we can do that, the more educated we are and the more options we have, I think the better the outcomes are for public health.
The options are always the best. More options, the better. I mean, that's just the way things are.
Sometimes, yeah.
I was going to ask, what's that?
I said
Say?
sometimes,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes more. Sometimes options are just overwhelming, but it
True.
depends on
True.
what you're doing.
Yeah. That's, oh, wait, hold on. Where did it go? Somebody asked a question. Where is he, Steve? There he is. Steve asks, if only zero nic was sold to youth, would they still buy it? That
I
opens up a whole discussion in a lot of ways, but you go
I
ahead.
think
What do you
so.
have to say? I think so
I
too.
think so. And it's, I'm drawing on, kind of my view of the popularity of nicotine pouches among young people, which is very, very low. I can't remember. I don't quote me on the numbers, but I think it's similarly, or is it? I don't know if Zinn if PMI had published some of their own numbers about youth. It's exceedingly low. It's below 4%, maybe below 2%. Oral tobacco products have always been very unpopular with young people. And I think the reason for that is it's not visible. There's no outward display of rebellion using an oral nicotine product,
Right.
unless you're fidgeting with the can, or just making a dramatic move to put a pouch in your cheek. It's just not something that someone can use to express rebellion. But puffing out a big cloud of vapor is, and so I wouldn't be surprised if zero nicotine were somehow magically the only thing available to young people. They would still buy it. I don't know
The
that they
younger
would.
ones, yeah. I mean, the amount. I mean, if you're going to believe like Truth Initiative and Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids and stuff, that all these kids didn't realize they had nicotine in it. I mean, that's what they tell us. They tell us, oh, these kids didn't even know there was nicotine in it. So that kind of tells you that by that marker, then that means that a lot of these kids thought it was just a fun thing to puff on, and it's the flavors. But of course, then you'd have the anti-tobacco nicotine group saying, well, it models behavior, so we can't have that either.
Yeah, I mean,
we heard that a lot early on when we first started advocating, where we just constantly they were saying, well, it looks like smoking and kids are going to see it and it's going to renormalize smoking,
and it
and it's like,
totally didn't. It
and it didn't at
absolutely
all.
didn't. I forgot about the whole renormalizing smoking thing. Yeah, it didn't
Yep.
didn't do anything of the sort, which
Yep.
is, yeah, another one of those just sort of amazing inconsistencies, glaring inconsistencies between what tobacco control activists have been saying since 2008 or before, and the reality is that none of that has come true.
Right. And one of the things that I thought of when I saw Steve's question was, um, yeah, they probably would. A lot of the kids, just because it's a cool thing to do, and kids like gadgets, but then it kind of would open up this problem of kids were allowed to vape zero nic with just flavors. Then they somehow get their hands on one that's like 5 5% or whatever it is, 50 milligram, whatever the salt, a jewel or something, or a disposable or something that does have high nicotine, and they think because they're allowed to use the other ones and they get their hands on that could, that you
I
could have a
I
sick
I,
kid.
I do see a question from Ern. I'm gonna
Oh,
put it up here. And so
oh yeah, I saw that, but I don't know
why
what
isn't Flume? It's actually Fume.
flume.
And I sat next to a guy from Fume,
Oh,
and
fume.
I'm not here to do promotion, but I don't think it matters, because at the end of the day, it's not a nicotine product. And I don't know if they have data on this or not. I don't know what youth interest is in this product. It is a flavored air product.
It's
I
it
don't
really
know.
literally is like air, right? It's not
Yeah,
even a vapor. It's
there's no
like,
battery, nothing is heated up. You
right, you suck
basically, there's like
flavored
a
air through a tube.
capsule in there, and you
Right.
draw air over it, and you get that flavor experience. You're not exhaling anything. You're not really inhaling anything concerning. I'm not really sure what makes up that flavor cartridge, but we're not even talking about heating things up, so
Right.
it is just flavor. Um, and I think, again, there is that, when we're expelling a visible cloud of something, I think that is what's really appealing in terms of, that visual expression of rebellion. Um, but I think, you are right. To putting that to your mouth, and it has like fidgety stuff built into it, so you can like twist the mouthpiece, you can flip it up and down, so it gives you something to focus on. They are marketing it as a nicotine-free alternative to
Right.
everything, basically. It is an interesting product. And again, I'm not here to promote it. I'm curious about it. And But yeah, I think I would be curious to see if young people are at all interested in this. And since there's no nicotine, it's like a kid probably using like a piece of gum. I mean, as far as I know, I don't think there's any real health issue with anybody using something like that. I don't know how effective it is at getting people away from nicotine, but if kids are going to use it, I don't know that it's a big deal. So,
Yeah, and it's not even new technology. I
right.
mean, I remember back in the 80s or the 70s, you could go to the drugstore and they'd have these fake cigarette tube things that you just would suck on. I don't even think they even had nicotine either,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy. So I have to stop the show
Yeah.
for a second because I have to say, I have to do this. We just got our very first super chat
Yay.
ever. Yay! And why am I not surprised it's Addie? Love you, Addie. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
Addie.
for that. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. That was exciting. I wasn't even
Yeah,
sure if we were working. I was like, awesome.
that
That was
was
fun.
that
That was
was
fun.
seamless. I'm really glad that worked out. We weren't sure how this was going to work out in terms of honoring the super chats. So thank you for helping us test that out, Addie, and thank you for your kind
And
words.
actually, that's exactly enough too to get us onto the thing to be able to put our bank information because you have to have $10 to be able to do that. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Addie.
Yeah.
Okay, anyhow, so back to the e-cigarette summit because we just veered off there a little bit. But this is all the kind of stuff that they talk about, this is the things that should be talked about. Now I did wonder, because in the beginning they didn't really have consumers, just like everything else, we were kind of overlooked, but it's never been an industry thing, has it's always
Yeah.
been tried to be like scientists, and we certainly didn't see the FDA showing up, we didn't see Truth Initiative showing up, we didn't see uh, former FDA people like Mitch Zeller showing up. I mean, that the first time they started doing that, that was a real big deal, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure. I think in 2015 or 2016, when I went to the first one in DC, I believe Mitch Zeller spoke.
Oh, did he? Okay.
And it was a little bit, being the first one, I think there was concern of, people kind of butting heads.
Sure.
Joe Gitchell, of course, had a slide involving Star Wars lightsaber battle, and kind of noting that there was a lot of tension, which again was something that Mitch Zeller brought up this year, 8 years after his first appearance at E-Cigarette Summit. We're still talking about how do we find common ground, and of course noting that globally that we're everything is polarized. We have people in separate camps, sort of unwilling to budge, unwilling to find some common ground. Not a new observation by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess I don't know, but this is again when we come back to risk communication and being honest about things. We have to start there, and so. But as far as featuring consumers, and I am going to stop for a second because we just
For
got our
that.
second super chat.
Yes.
Earn.
Oops. I'm
Oh, look,
doing it.
we're the same
Thank you, Ern. Thanks for the super chat. We love you too. We might have to do a
Um,
thing where we do them at the end if this gets to be a lot.
but
Um,
I think the conference has always been very sensitive to achieving a balance in terms of presentations. Uh, it's over the years. I think the first one that I spoke at, or no, wait, it was it was last year or the year before. Um, I was a speaker, and Amanda had told me it was again in an early session, and Matt Myers was actually a presenter and a panelist. But I think the agreement was that they needed to make room for someone, one of the science and data presenters. They needed to make room for them to be on the stage, and so to add me to the panel, even though they wanted to, the sort of logistically a number of chairs, I would be the one to sit down, and I was fine with that. And when it came time for the panel discussion, they showed the slide, and my name was still up there. And so I was sort of sitting there thinking like, no, I know I'm not supposed to go, but people started looking at me, and I thought, okay, if I don't get up there, this is actually going to look bad for Amanda in the conference. So I ended up on the panel. I wasn't supposed to be. I made sure to get off the stage this year, but I ended up on the panel and actually was able to counter, I think, some of the things that Matt Myers had said, and it was good. But all of that to say, they've been very sensitive about making sure that this is a data and science driven conference. I don't know that any of the tobacco companies have presented at this conference. Pretty much everybody who gets up and speaks gives their disclosures. They are presenting data, and so that is part of the routine. And I don't believe there were any people with any conflicts. But we are all actually, everybody should be acutely aware that the science coming out of tobacco companies is actually very high quality, especially in the United States. They are held to account for this. That's why we have the Tobacco Control Act. It's why they have to go through pre-market authorization. And so they're not really allowed to get away with the shenanigans of, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and probably early 2000s.
I mean, just knowing that somebody from Truth was there, it just, to me, I guess coming from this since 2009 and trying to be taken seriously if you weren't coming, if this was an event that wasn't created by tobacco control or created by the government or, created by academia with and tobacco control type universities and stuff, they wouldn't show up. If we had some kind of event like this, like E-cigarette Summit, where the truth is supposed to be discussed and not just pro ban everything, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So, old me, who's been doing this for way too long, it still gets a little thrill at seeing like, wow, we actually have them showing up to something like this. And that,
well,
I don't know, that might be weird, but
I can't. It may have been one of the early ones, the first or second one in DC, maybe the third one. I think, in his last name, I think is Soneji. It was requested that he was part of the presentations, part of the panel, and he got up there and presented stuff that was like years old, and it was basically just a stream of tobacco control talking points. And gateway was discussed, I'm sure, formaldehyde and whatnot, a lot of this stuff that in the community we had been debunking, and other researchers had debunked some of these myths. And that was the one where, I mean, there were audible like hisses and groans during his presentation. And I think he took that and went to at Truth or some other organization and kind of complained about it publicly. And I think that may have cooled a bit of the participation coming from tobacco control. So I'm really glad that Truth Initiative sent Dr. Graham, and that we did have just a straightforward, honest conversation presentation about the work and their app, and it was very welcomed. And that's the kind of participation that we need. We don't need people from the campaigns coming and just spewing their campaign talking points. Everybody is curious about it. It's a science and data conference. Everybody is curious. That's how it works. So I'm
Or at
glad
least they
that
should
he
be.
participated.
Yeah, it's easy then to, especially if you're on Twitter and you see all the misinformation and having to do all the community notes and such. I can see how there would be, as soon as somebody comes out, this is so and so from the Truth Initiative, of going, I'd probably have to bite my tongue too, because it's like boo, go away. But
Yeah.
really, it's progress. It's
Yeah.
progress. They're listening, because hopefully they didn't do, like, who was it who came and just turned around and left? Was that Brian King, where he came for, like,
That's pretty
that wasn't
typical,
this. That wasn't this.
actually.
It was something else. But
Yeah, no, he was at well, he was at E-cigarette Summit last year,
okay,
and I think
was it
that was
something
sort of a
else?
dip in, dip out kind of thing, ushered out. I think that may have been his first attendance at one of these sort of pro. I don't even want to say pro harm reduction conferences, but at a conference like
Not
E-cigarette Summit, where
anti.
we're not just talking about the only outcome is let's ban everything.
Right.
Um, and so he did show up, and there was supposed to be a brief period for Q&A, but he just talked the whole time, and I think he left like maybe 5 minutes at the end and made some comment about, like, I've taken too much time, I got to go. And he was sort of ushered out. He travels with handlers and
Mhm.
staff, and so he was ushered out. And that was, I think, when Guy Bentley chased him out and caught him in the parking lot and asked him a question. I don't know if it was about banning flavors or something, or if they were going to authorize any flavors, something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was Brian King. But he has, to his credit, at GTNF, I know he stuck around for an extended Q&A, and
Yeah.
even panelists were involved in that. That was in the when GTNF last year was in Seoul. And to his credit, he got up there and he just took it. I mean, there were some angry questions directed at
I'll
him.
bet.
So there is a shift, and it is a welcome shift, where he is making himself available for Q&A among potentially hostile audience. And so that's a good thing. He did not participate in the panel discussion, but he did have a Q&A. I have my own thoughts about some of his responses. He is not shy on delivering some attitude in some of his responses. But
I know.
to
I
hear him
saw.
describe his schedule, I'm sure he's very tired.
Well, I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter. There were some comments and such, and it seemed like it was a lot of the same talking points of youth and youth
Yeah,
and youth and youth.
yeah,
And he still just will not take seriously what you know. And that's the thing that always gets me. If you want youth to not vape or smoke, their parents shouldn't be vaping or smoking. You have to take care of it from that point. I mean, I think it's something like, I forget. I haven't looked at the statistic recently, but the statistic on kids who have parents who smoke ending up smoking themselves is like huge compared to kids who have parents who don't smoke. And that right there, and then the fact that most people who try smoking do not go on to smoke for the rest of their lives. The vast majority of them
right.
don't. If you look at the numbers of who former smokers are, the people who formerly smoked, it's a huge number. And what's funny is that tobacco control often wants to take credit for that. Look, we have all these people we got to quit. And a lot of times, because they had more than 100 cigarettes in a lifetime, which is really not very many. That's 5 packs in your
Five
whole life.
packs.
Um, that they're considered people who were smokers, and they count them in as people who quit, who never really started. You got those people who, oh, I go out to a bar and I have a pack of cigarettes and I only do that a few times a year. I mean, those people are not inveterate smokers. They're not.
Yeah.
And so to take
And,
credit for that, so most people do quit. So it just, yeah, that whole
and
thing, they need to start focusing on adults, because they're the ones who told me. It's
we're
their
we're the
information that told me that kids whose parents smoke are most likely to smoke. So I know they know this.
yeah. I mean, we're adults. We're the ones modeling the behavior.
Mhm.
And so that was, some of the promise of vaping and other smoke-free alternatives is kids who see their parents moving away from cigarettes to something less harmful. That's a positive behavior
Exactly.
for kids to see. And hopefully, as we go forward, moms and dads have all the information available to them to have these complicated, nuanced conversations, not just about nicotine, but about all drugs, which as you're talking, I'm sitting here, knowing that
Right.
most people, first of all, most people don't use drugs.
Right.
Second of all, most people who use drugs don't exhibit anything that qualifies as like problematic use or substance use disorder. So it's really across the board a much smaller percentage of people who fall into that addiction or problematic use category,
Right.
and
And Addie,
and
just I'm
they're
gonna for our listeners, Addie said from the Gov UK, children whose parents smoke are 4 times more likely to take up smoking. So, there you go, 4 times. I mean, that's huge.
yeah
And
the
you know what? I'm going to push back a little on you about the whole most people don't do drugs because they're using caffeine all the time. That caffeine is a drug, people. Thank you.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so we should have to start winding down, but I want to ask you, as an audience member, what was the best line of the day? What was the best thing that you said, damn, that's good, would you say?
Oh
Was
man,
that
I
just
gotta.
made you go, oh my God, I have to share this, or I have to remember that, or conversely, you could say, what was the worst thing that you saw? We can all commiserate with you. What would
Well,
you say?
Clive Bates always has salient
Oh
points.
yeah,
It feels like that's a softball answer,
he's awesome
but
though.
he definitely, gave us a visual representation of, the licit and illicit market in the United States. I've got several things that really stuck out, honestly, and of course, I think Clive Bates sort of reaffirming things that we've been saying for a while, which is prohibition is not regulation. So when you look at a pie chart of what's been authorized in the United States without regard for, products that are on the market because of pending applications or court ordered stays, it's a tiny, so he showed a pie chart with a tiny sliver of blue. That's those 23 products that FDA has authorized, 16 of which actually contain nicotine. And then there's this huge yellow space around that. And for him to describe that as these are the products that are unregulated, prohibition is not regulation. I think that was a very important point that we have to continue reminding people, especially anybody with a prohibition mindset. You're not regulating the products; you're effectively just giving up. So that was very important. Ben Uden from New Zealand uh, gave us that compare and contrast between Australia and New Zealand,
Oh yeah, yeah.
not
Put it
just
on
not
Twitter.
just describing the policies, but showing the results. And you can see in the decline in smoking prevalence in New Zealand compared to Australia, New Zealand is ahead of the game. And I think even in Australia, again, Clive, going back to Clive Bates, showing that pie chart, there are more products authorized or legally sold in Australia compared to the United States. But declines in smoking there. It's a prescription only model, of
Right, because
course,
it's
but
prescription. I
yeah,
didn't realize.
and
I
so
wouldn't call it
it's
approved, but I see what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
even though there are products legally being sold, it's still not working, and smoking prevalence is just on that very slow, steady decline that we saw before e-cigarettes became available. And then, of course, I think I know there were many more presentations. Ken Warner presented a modeling study. I think he's presented these in the past, looking at sort of considering kind of the worst case scenarios of things and looking at morbidity and mortality. And once again, showing that, even if people are using, even if we have this, a rise in nicotine use through e-cigarettes, I think I'm sure I'm butchering I know I'm butchering his presentation. But it was, it's a modeling study, so it's not necessarily, that alone isn't going to change policy, but it's an interesting way to look at what we know about things, and look towards the future and see what the possible outcomes might be, and showing that even if we assume kind of worst case scenarios here, early death and disease from just nicotine is huge from what we have now. So I think that was a really good point to make. And then, of course, the concluding panel with Professors McNeil and Mermelstein, and that reference to seeing quit rates among young people being far greater than anything that they've ever seen with cigarettes. I think is another one of those sort of, these are things that people should be celebrating. That youth smoking in the United States is going to be a thing of the past, and that's I think everybody needs to acknowledge that, and I would love for the next time that National Youth Tobacco Survey data is released, that we don't have to continue hearing how big of a problem all of this is. It sounds very scary once the CDC gets a hold of it, once the media gets a hold of it. But the reality is we are on track to see smoking disappear probably within the next 10 to 20 years, at least in the United States.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
And the switch to focusing on nicotine is just, I can't remember if it was Carl or Brad who said, it was something like, well over 100 or something like that of people who've never smoked would have to take up vaping to offset the benefits of one person switching to vaping, one person who smokes switching to vaping. I mean, it's just, it was probably even bigger than that, because just the risks are so low with them that to worry about the people picking up vaping who have never smoked, it was just, it's so infinitesimal as far as the risk factor that you just saving one person who's smoking now, it would take so many people, never smokers, to do that. So well, we have reached the end of the hour. I am going to start pulling up some banners so we can do the spiel. That's thanks to everybody who's been watching today, and we are going to wrap things up.
Yeah, and right before we get into it, I'm glad that we've waited until the end for me to say this, that we have the most viewers online right now throughout the program. Thank you all for tuning in. As you have probably seen some messages, CASAA is in desperate need of funding if we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And when I got to the mailbox yesterday, I found a check from the Florida Smoke-Free Association for $10,000.
Wow.
Nick and Dolores and everybody at FSFA, thank you very much. It is incredibly helpful. And we hope that we can, get some interest from other folks to keep our efforts going. And we will be doing an all-day fundraiser tentatively. I think it's fair to say tentatively.
June 15th is the date that we put aside. Yep.
And we worked out the time zone issues, so this will not conflict with GFN. We are 6 hours behind Poland, so Warsaw. So we will we'll be doing that all day. We've got some great guests lined up. Hope you'll join us for that.
Trying to get some superstars in the THR community that we are trying to get lined up, and possibly doing something with Lindsay over with GFN. Alex has got to talk to her about that. We've got super chats now, but just keep in mind, I know that in that little clip that we put out that I was talking about it, and I said $1 a day. We have nearly 300,000 members. So I was saying if just half of those 300,000 give us $1 a day, we'd be in the clear. So, I mean, if you can, please make it more than $1, because I don't think we're going to get 150,000 people to donate $1. So anything that you could give, and it's those monthly subscriptions that we need. We love these big things. They help take the pressure off for a few months, but it's that monthly stuff coming in that keeps us doing this. If you want Alex to go to E-cigarette Summit again and represent us again next year, we need to get that monthly income.
There are trips to Silver Spring, Maryland in the future. We've got some modified risk applications coming up for review. Those are things that we participate in and give the consumer perspective on access to those products. We do that whether or not those companies give us money. We do accept those checks if they come through. But
probably short about what, 7,000 a month that we need to get in. So I mean, it's like, we need more than just $1 from 200 people. It's unfortunately more than that. But so we do have a show on June 1st. June 1st is the next show. That'll be you and Logan. We have no idea what we're going to talk about, who we're going to talk to, but we'll figure that out in the interim. That's what we usually do. And then the next one after that will be hopefully this all day fundraiser thing that we're planning, having people come in and all sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
watch for that too. And we will make sure you guys do this. I'm going to let Alex take us out.
So yeah, I get to do the rundown of all of this stuff now. So if you have not already joined CASAA, you're doing it wrong. Stop what you're doing right now. You don't have to leave the stream. Just open up another window, go to CASAA.org and click the join button. We do not spam you with a lot of stuff. We're very careful about our membership, and we don't want to drive you away. We need you engaged on these legislative and policy battles. So we guard our list very carefully. And while you're there on the website, make sure that you donate, as we just discussed. We are in desperate need of funding to keep going with this effort. And we know that a lot of the legislation we saw this year is probably coming back next year. So threats to people's access to safer nicotine products is still a big deal. And we need all of your help to do it. And once you've joined CASAA and chipped in a couple bucks, maybe $5 or 10 grand, make sure to go over and pick yourself up some t-shirts or other stuff on our Threadless store. They look nice. Oh wait, there you go. There's one.
There you go.
Danielle Jones did a great job with all these designs. So advocate in style. Make sure you pick up some CASAA merch. What's the next one?
Sorry, I'm doing stuff. Logan's not behind the scenes. I'm doing everything today, you guys, so just bear with me.
Also, while you're on our website, be sure to submit your testimonial if you haven't already. We have a page dedicated for this. We have, of course, the testimonial collection for the United States. There is also an international collection. CASAA has, I think we're at like 13,500 testimonials that we have been collecting since 2011. Those are absolutely vital. And as you're typing out your testimonial to put up on our site, keep a copy for yourself, because these are the stories that we need to get in front of lawmakers. And your personal experience has a lot of impact. So get your typing fingers ready and tell the world your story about switching. And also another resource on our website that we hope to keep going. We have the lawmaker lookup tools and calls to action. Obviously, we do a lot of the pre-written messaging, asking everybody to include your story, personalizing your messages to lawmakers when these issues flare up. And if you want to do this independently, we've got an easy lookup tool through the system that we use, and you can find all the contact information you could ever want about your lawmakers and send them messages, make phone calls. You can probably even find a fax number if that's how you roll.
And that's your donations need to pay for that.
Right, exactly. That really is one of the core services that we are here for, is connecting all of you with all of the lawmakers and helping to educate them. Outside of the website, follow us on all the social medias: Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and the classic e-cigarette summit, or e-cigarette forum.
I post on there.
Kristen keeping the torch alive in e-cigarette forum, where CASAA was actually born. And don't forget to join your CASAA state Facebook group. This is a place for us to hear about local stuff. I've said this time and time again: tracking local legislation is exceedingly difficult and therefore expensive, which is not something that we've ever been able to afford. So if you hear things going on in your town, be sure to drop us a note in your state page. It's also a great place to get connected with other people in your community, talk about what's going on, perhaps even sharing tips and tricks about how these products are working for you. If you don't have vape shops in your community, you're going to have to support one another. So your state Facebook group is a good place to do that. Generally, I don't think we really allow product-specific conversation.
Linking to stuff we don't allow, but you can talk about stuff, and you can get into side chats, and if you need to help find something and things like that, you could always do it in a side chat. So
like the rest of social media, it's a great place to meet, get organized, and support one another. And that's what the state pages are for.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, remember, you are CASAA. Feel
Yes,
really cheesy
it's
saying
not
it that
just
way.
us. It's not just us. We would be nothing. We didn't have you're the CASAA army. If we didn't have you guys there, we definitely couldn't be everywhere and do everything. So,
Yeah.
you are definitely CASAA. CASAA needs its members. CASAA needs you guys to step up and help do what needs to be done. So,
And on that note, so this organization was born out of the community. And so when
mhm.
we do our thing on the 15th, I'm gonna switch roles with Kristen here, and you are going to talk about some of the origins. You did a wonderful blog post about this several years ago. Thank you for sticking around. By the way, Kristen is an OG CASA leader, and so
I
we're
didn't
going
have
to
gray
talk
hair
about
back
that.
then.
CASA has given Kristen tons of gray hair. I came to the party looking like this. But
The
what a
advocate.
stressful thing this has been. So we'll talk about that in more depth on the 15th. So thank you for all that you have done, Chris, and all that you continue to do. And,
I'm here to the bitter end, and I'm trying to make sure
extend,
there is no bitter end. So,
yeah, yeah. And extending that out to everybody watching today, everybody who is within our membership. Thank you for all that you guys have done. Thank you for participating. Thank you for having these conversations. Thank you for coming here to learn, and thank you for spreading the good word.
and
And
shout out to the replay crew and folks listening to us on all the listening places like Spotify and stuff like that. I'm not sure exactly where we're all at. So,
yeah,
we will see you in 2 weeks. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your weekend. A lot of places have some really nice weather. Thoughts and prayers for Houston right now.
yeah.
Hope they're all doing okay. But thanks again, and we will see you later.
See you around.
Bye.